Looking back at Hey Arnold as a series, there were so many episodes that would come loaded with truly morbid implications. Episodes like Pigeon Man or Curly Snaps, which would show situations that you could certainly perceive as hinting towards something much darker. However, for every episode that subtly implied events more gruesome than what was being portrayed on screen, there were a handful of episodes that essentially did the same thing, just more directly and in your face. Arnold Betrays Iggy was an excellent example where we saw Arnold and Iggy's social lives both completely obliterated in very different and embarrassing ways. I recently made a video about that one, and I'll have it linked down below just in case you missed it. Another mind-blowing example though is the episode Sid's Revenge, where Sid full-blown tries to put a curse on Principal Wards to get revenge on him. However, of all the different examples that we could discuss, there's one that kinda stands above all in a very different way. It's an episode that's genuinely so shocking to its core and so creepy that the entire thing in and of itself almost feels like a fever dream. It's an episode that, on all levels, kind of embodies that creepy, in-your-face, morbid energy. However, above all else, it's a classic episode that, as creepy as it is, has stood the test of time and aged rather well in my opinion. That's why today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're looking at none other than the episode Monkey Business. Really quick though, before we get into this one, I'm super curious on the topic of most messed up episode in the series. Which episode do you think is the most shocking and morbid? Like, what's the first episode that comes to mind? Also, does the morbid nature hit harder when it's clear as day, or does it land a little more intensely when it's subtly implied? Sound off down in the comments, my friends. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. And, of course, thank you so much for being here, by the way. I really appreciate your time. As this episode starts out, we hear Mr. Simmons talking to his class of 4th graders about medical science and how far that we've come since the days of bloodletting and using leeches to rid people of their illnesses. He goes on to explain the now debunked diseases of yore, such as lupus aureolus, a disease that would essentially see its victim turning into a rabbit.
But probably the most ridiculous was monkey nucleosis, in which the victim, after coming in contact with an infected monkey, developed monkey-like characteristics.
What a bunch of twaddle.
Early physicians believed a mere scratch or touch from a monkey would cause the victim to contract the dreaded disease, leading to sweating, fever, and eventually expiration.
Later on, we see Helga and Phoebe walking down the street as Helga talks about how that lesson was nothing but a bunch of baloney. Phoebe intelligently defends its nature, talking about how in history a ton of scientists have taken very bold and often criticized stances based on odd hypotheses in an effort to better understand mankind. Even then, Phoebe still contemplates the hypothetical posing of the question to Helga, what would you do if you only had 5 days to live?
Well, personally, I'd probably stuff my face full of ice cream, skip school, and just go around goofing on people.
That's deep, Helga. Well, see you tomorrow.
Helga keeps on walking, and not long after, she ends up bumping into Arnold, who's skateboarding on the sidewalk, minding his own business around the corner from her. As per usual, he says sorry, and she just starts berating him and tearing him to pieces, calling him stupid. But the moment that he's out of earshot, she's delivering a romantic soliloquy about her feelings for him. She wanders into the park, fixated on her locket, until eventually she sees a massive group of people gathered around an organ grinder and his pet monkey performing.
Doesn't he do anything else?
I'm so sorry, little girl. My monkey, he's very emotional.
Helga ends up angrily storming off, and later on at her house, we see her reading on her bed. Eventually, though, she ends up realizing that her arm is turning red, swollen, and is getting really itchy exactly in the spot where the monkey came into contact with her. At that, she begins to hear Mr. Simmons' words about monkey nucleosis echoing in her mind.
A mere scratch or touch from a monkey would cause the victim to contract the dreaded disease.
Monkey nucleosis, yeah, right. Like I'm really gonna turn into a monkey. Gee, maybe I better check this thing out.
Now, on a quest to get some answers, instead of going to the doctor, Helga decides to go to the library and look at an old book about ancient diseases long since debunked by medical science. She slams the book on the counter and flips to the page about monkey nucleosis, reviewing the scientifically implausible symptoms of this made-up disease.
Itching and puffiness? I've got that! 2 sweaty palms. Phew. 3 loss of appetite, 4 irritability, and finally, expiration. Well, at least I've only got one of the symptoms. Sweaty palms! The second symptom!
Things get even worse for Helga when later on that evening she finds herself sitting at the dinner table with her family, having absolutely no appetite. As her dad questions what's wrong with her, she flips back to the book about disproven ailments, remembering that loss of appetite is yet another symptom of monkey nucleosis. As the night progresses, we see Helga laying in bed, having fallen asleep while reading the book. She begins to dream of an old-timey theater where a man who sounds oddly identical to Mr. Simmons is giving a presentation on a creature who he describes as the result of a disproven yet nevertheless debilitating disease.
Half human, half monkey. Look.
I'm not an animal! I'm a girl!
No, wait! Where are you going? You can't survive out there.
Monkey Helga escapes the theater in a panic and runs down the street as all of the buildings around her, one by one, turn into monkey heads. Eventually, though, she finds solace in the light at the end of the tunnel. Arnold.
Arnold, wait!
Sorry, do I know you?
It's me, Helga! There's something I have to tell you, Arnold. I love you. I really love you. I never had the guts to tell you.
But you're not Helga. You're a monkey. A monkey girl.
Arnold, I love you! Oh!
Just then, the organ grinder from before comes up and lovingly picks up Helga, saying that he's been looking everywhere for his little monkey and that the people are waiting for a show. She tries her best to stop him, questioning what he's talking about, but her words seem to fall on deaf ears as, next thing you know, she's already in the little monkey costume and being set down, forced to perform against her will.
Can't she do anything else?
Just then, Helga shoots awake, immediately looking to her book, seeing that the last symptom is irritability. She's thankful to not be suffering from that yet, but just then, the phone rings. She answers it to find none other than her best friend Phoebe on the other line, asking if she remembers what their math homework was. At that, Helga's immediately through the roof angry that Phoebe would call her to ask such a question, which of course has her alarmed, thinking that this is related to monkey nucleosis.
Irritability, the 4th symptom. That only leaves the final stage. inspiration. Phoebe, as my best friend in the world, there's something I need you to do for me.
Before you know it, we see Arnold arriving at Helga's house to find the rest of his friends there, each of them dressed their best and confused as to why Phoebe asked them all to be here today. Upstairs, we see Helga reviewing her last will and testament, telling a very confused Phoebe that she wants her to have all of her books.
I don't understand. Why are you giving away all your things?
Don't ask, just promise me you'll stay as innocent and carefree as you are now.
Are you moving? Is that what this is all about?
No, that isn't it. But there isn't much time. Just take my books and go.
Helga asks Phoebe for one final favor, hoping that she'll just return the book that she borrowed from the library, saying that maybe it'll help some other poor kid in the future. Some time and a few dramatic interactions later, we see all of the kids downstairs with the stuff that Helga gave them as Arnold waits to be called up last. Rhonda heads down the stairs, telling Arnold that he's up, showing everybody the outdated dresses that Helga gave her, calling this entire thing crazy.
Now that I'm about to go, I guess I might as well tell you.
Tell me what?
All these past years while I've berated you and called you names like Football Head and Hair Boy and Yutz and Paste for Brains and...
Helga, what's your point?
My point is that I really don't hate you, Arnold. In fact, quite the contrary. In the pit of my heart, in the depths of my soul, I truly love you.
Helga, wait!
Phoebe tells Helga that she has everything all wrong and that contact with the monkey isn't deadly whatsoever. As she explains that the worst thing that you can encounter might be just a mild skin irritation, Helga realizes that at this point her arm is completely back to normal, not even slightly pink anymore. She begins to celebrate the fact that she's not actually gonna expire as she hops out of bed with glee.
I'm glad everything's okay, Helga. But what were you gonna say that was so important?
Nothing. I was delirious. And what would I want to say to a football head like you, anyway? Arnold, wait a sec.
Yeah?
I wanted to tell you that, look, I think you're okay.
Arnold walks up and pats Helga on the arm, telling her that he thinks she's okay too, before he walks out of the room, leaving Helga overflowing with glee over the simple fact that he'd touched her. And as Helga lays in her bed giddy over the whole interaction, the episode comes to an end. Now, we have a good amount of ground to cover as far as this episode goes. This episode absolutely did not hold back in any sense. What's so special about it though is the fact that it comes with not only a ton of in-your-face morbid moments, but it's also an episode where the more you ponder it and contemplate the events, the darker it gets. The more this one sets in, the more you see some of the hidden undertones that really make this one chilling to its core. At the heart of this episode, the epicenter of the terror without a doubt was that poor little monkey. It's absolutely insane to consider that they didn't necessarily make the monkey a creepy creature by any means. It's not meant to be scary. They draw him cute, they make his general demeanor and mannerisms adorable. However, the freaky nature of it all is rooted in the dancing, which that's pure human programming at this point, not even natural monkey instinct. It's the pure, stiff, unnatural movements. That combined with the organ grinder's creepy music that was going along with it though, it's just, so spine-chilling in a really odd and specific way for me. I feel like it triggers some sort of deep, distant, terrifying childhood memory, but I just can't quite put my finger on it. Even deeper than that though, was the whole dream sequence and the way that monkey Helga was dancing to the organ grinder's music. The whole aesthetic and feel of this scene just takes the concept of fever dreams to an entirely different level. It quickly goes from a very odd and unsettling dream to full-blown nightmare fuel in the blink of an eye. The biggest thing that this whole chain of events did, though, was show us as viewers in a very subtle way that this could very well be the misery of this monkey imprinting on Helga's psyche. Of course, it could very well be the case that the saliva from the monkey caused a mild allergic reaction that her autoimmune system had to fight off, which caused this insane fever dream. But beyond that, it could also be seen as her subconsciously realizing deep inside how miserable and just kind of on autopilot that this monkey is, being nothing but a prop for this organ grinder to make a few bucks. Being Pavlov trained to the point where the music starts and his body just kind of begins moving without him even having any control over it. The monkey doesn't even know why it happens, and he clearly doesn't want to be doing it, but he still does it, and it's probably always been this way since he was young. It's just kind of an ingrained nature at this point that was put into him by humans. That entire sentiment was completely portrayed clear as day in Helga's dream. Right after Arnold walks away and Monkey Helga is crying, the organ grinder appears, and it doesn't matter how badly that she doesn't want to go with him. It doesn't matter how terrified she is. She still ends up in that little costume dancing for the group of people without even having any control over her actions. Of course, it certainly needs to be acknowledged that this entire nightmare is also likely an indicator of some subconscious guilt on her behalf due to how she acted toward the little monkey who was actually living his entire life in the position that she had one single nightmare about having to live in. Even then though, those two things go hand in hand. She felt that guilt not only because of how she acted toward the monkey, but also because she subconsciously connected the dots on how messed up it is that this creature, who, as Mother Nature intended it, should probably have been raised in a jungle or rainforest somewhere, is living his life being treated like a sideshow attraction for people's enjoyment, or, in the case of how she treated the monkey, for people to make fun of and put down. I think what really may have been the biggest nail in the coffin as far as the creep factor for us as viewers is the fact that none of these specific points were really ever resolved in this episode. Helga's brazen behavior toward the monkey and the guilt that she felt about it was never really verbally acknowledged or played out at all. There was no follow-up with the monkey or facing the organ grinder to move past her fears. It was just kind of left as a loose end, more or less lingering over the entire rest of the story. Likely the biggest aspect that makes it linger for so long though would be the fact that it's just so dumbfounding that this monkey was obsessed with Helga of all people. I mean, if we're being honest, this little guy genuinely just looks so miserable. His demeanor just screams unhappy. Meanwhile, quite the contrary, everybody around him is completely enamored with him and just obsessed with watching him dance. But he doesn't care whatsoever. That doesn't spark joy for him. He hates that all of these people buy into this shtick that he's forced into. What does spark joy though is the girl who has absolutely no interest in him and seems to hate this whole thing. It really is ironic when you look at it that way. But also, I have to admit that I'm genuinely curious if the monkey's big interest in Helga was just random, or if it was kind of a testament to how miserable that he is, forced to be a performer and having everyone fawn over him all the time as this dude makes money off of his existence. Like, maybe the allure of Helga was the fact that she was the one person here who seemed to hate this shtick just as much as the monkey himself does. Aside from the psychology of this monkey and what drives his love for Helga though, we have to acknowledge just how far things went for poor Helga psychologically. I mean, this poor girl was pushed to the point of having nightmares about all of this. She's straight up dreaming about turning into a monkey and being put on display for everybody to gawk at. Even heavier than that, though, was the part of the dream where she runs into Arnold. Helga finally works up the courage to tell him how she feels, worrying that this might be the last chance that she'll ever have to do it. But sadly, it's just too late. Arnold doesn't even recognize her anymore. She's too far gone for him to see her as who she really is. As a matter of fact, any hope that she ever had for even finding any love or a sense of normal life is immediately ripped away as the organ grinder shows up, claiming her as his property and forcing her to live a life of performing for people and begging for change with a little cup, just like the monkey that she saw at the park. Now, again, we tore this apart at face value, but it's interesting to take into account the Arnold aspect of all this. This dream and the interaction that she had with Arnold was her subconsciously acknowledging her fear of not working up the courage to tell him how she feels until it's too late. In this context, it manifested in the form of her turning into a monkey before she could tell him the truth, but in a more broad sense, it underlines a bigger point. It subtly shines a light on the fear that she has deep inside that she's never going to tell Arnold the truth about how she feels. Or, at least by the time she does work up the courage, life will have pushed them too far apart. Outside of Helga's obsession with Arnold though, on a psychological note, this is a clear-cut example of hypochondria if we've ever seen it. Like, Helga learns about this disease at school, even going as far as disavowing it and calling it a bunch of baloney. Which, I mean, she wasn't wrong. It factually is a bunch of baloney. But after that mild reaction to a bit of monkey saliva, she reads the symptoms of monkey nucleosis in this book, which, mind you, is about diseases that have been proven factually to not exist, and she starts to develop symptoms simply because she learned more about this made-up disease. It's pretty much her brain making her body feel these symptoms, or at least thinking that she's feeling these symptoms as a reaction to the overall anxiety of this potentially being an actual disease that could be afflicting her. In all reality, what she really had was some itching and puffiness, likely from the saliva, but other than that, the other symptoms were rather normal. The true absolute irony, though, is the fact that Helga, of all people, was alarmed about irritability being a symptom of this disease, when, like, she knows as much as anybody else that she's irritable 24/7. I mean, I don't think any of us were surprised that Phoebe called her within minutes of her waking up and she reacted angrily. On a bit of a deeper note though, we have to talk about how messed up it is that Helga decided that it was in her best interest for her to take all of this into her own hands. Helga straight up diagnosed herself. She decided that she was expiring. She even had a final will and testament drafted up and notarized, going as far as pretty much planning a pre-death funeral for herself with her friends. All instead of maybe just telling her parents or going to see a doctor. I mean, the moment that her arm started swelling up, itching, and turning red the way that it was, instead of doing the logical thing and reaching out for some help, she instead went to the library. Not only did she go to the library, but instead of reaching for a legit medical journal or anything, she chose this book about diseases that have been proven not to exist. I mean, in a sense, I feel like the modern sentiment to a 9-year-old doing this in the 90s is literally anybody in the modern era using WebMD to try and diagnose themselves. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I told WebMD that I got itchy after contact with a monkey, and it tried to tell me that I had monkey nucleosis or something equally as outlandish. All in all though, one big way that we could perceive this is kind of as a lesson in doubting and immediately dismissing everything for Helga. We actually saw her doing that multiple times in this episode as well. Of course, the biggest point-blank example of this was her immediately hating the monkey and calling it dumb because all it can do is dance. But the first time we saw it was the moment where she immediately called Mr. Simmons' lesson a bunch of baloney. Now, that one made sense at least, but still, it almost felt like the events of this one were kind of like her subconscious trying to warn her of the dangers of immediately dismissing everything that she encounters in life without considering if it's actually valid of being dismissed. If there were anything else that I want to bring up in closing in an effort to kind of end on a bit of a positive note, it would be the fact that it's totally odd to consider that Mr. Simmons was straight up doing an entire lesson on things that were factually incorrect. I mean, this right here might actually be the most ironic part of the episode. Of course, it's important to learn about past mistakes as to not have history repeat itself, but like, it's one thing to warn young students about how civilizations used to use leeches and bloodletting as a cure-all and the dangers of that, and it's another thing to go on this long drawn-out explanation of diseases that turn people into rabbits or monkeys. I guess, from a benefit of the doubt, devil's advocate point of view, I get trying to make the lesson interesting by adding zany bits of info to keep the kids' attention, but on the whole, you have to admit that it's incredibly ironic that their teacher is presenting an entire lesson based around complete inaccuracy. But I have to ask, what do you guys think? Was this episode just as morbid as you remember? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, you already know I have to give some love to my friends in the true 90s kids tier over on Patreon and of course on YouTube memberships. Thank you so much for donating your hard-earned money to my cause and helping me pursue all of my creative endeavors. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and give a little praise to the algorithm in hopes that it pushes this one to everyone else. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one. Peace.